You jolt awake, drenched in sweat, heart racing like you've just sprinted for miles. The dream, or was it a nightmare, still lingers in the edges of your mind, blurring the line between sleep and waking. It had felt so real, too real. In the dream, she was there. Lilith. You'd heard stories, whispers of the first woman cast out of Eden, of the demoness who wandered the realms, seducing men, taking what she desired. But you'd never believed in them. Who could? Just legends to frighten children. Yet now, every detail of her presence in the dream haunts you. The scent of jasmine and smoke, her eyes glowing with something ancient and cruel, and they had bored into you deep, like she could see every secret you'd ever kept. Her voice still echoes in your head, velvet and dangerous. I will have what I came for. You shake it off, convincing yourself it was just a trick of your subconscious, maybe too many late nights, too many horror movies. You push yourself up from the bed, ready to splash some cold water on your face, hoping that will clear away the remnants of this nightmare. But then something shifts in the room. The air grows thick and oppressive. You feel it. A presence. The hair on the back of your neck rises in a primal warning. Your room, once familiar, is now foreign, darker somehow. Your breath catches when you see her. She's standing at the foot of your bed. Lilith. She's exactly as she was in the nightmare, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes that glow like embers in the shadows, lips curved into an unknowing smile. She doesn't belong here. She can't. But there she is, tangible, real, and far more terrifying outside the dream than within it. You thought you could just wake up and escape me. Her voice is just as silky, just as terrifyingly sweet as it had been moments before. You try to speak, to ask how this is happening, to demand she leaves, but your throat tightens, refusing to obey. It's like you're frozen, caught between the worlds of dreams and reality. But this is real. She is real. I've come for your seed, she says, her voice low and sultry. And I won't leave until I have it. Your mind screams in protest, but your body, it's not listening. Her touch is electric, seeping into your very core. It's as if she's drawing something from you, something vital. The room feels darker, the air thicker, with every passing second, as if the very essence of your life is being siphoned away. You try to close your eyes, but even that small comfort eludes you. All you can do is watch as she takes what she came for, feeling your strength, your will, slip away. You're mine now, she says softly, running a finger along your jawline. And with that, she vanishes like smoke in the wind, leaving only oppressive silence and the lingering terror in her wake. You lie there gasping for breath, unsure if you're awake or still trapped in a twisted nightmare. But you know one thing for certain. Lilith was here. Hello and welcome back to Ladies of Lore, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of the most powerful women in mythology and folklore. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. If you are new to the podcast, then welcome on in, and I hope you love it as much as I love making it. And if you're returning, thank you so much. You are the sweetest. Today we're exploring the mysterious and often misunderstood figure of Lilith, a woman who has been depicted as everything from a demon to a feminist icon. But who is she really? Where did she come from? And how has her story changed over time? I am so excited for you to hear this one. I have really loved doing the research for this one. There is so much out there about Lilith, so if you've really enjoyed this episode when you get to the end of it, I do encourage you to pop online, have a little look, and I'll also pop some links in the show notes, as per usual, for all of the stuff that I use to help me research for this episode. Now, the topic for this episode was suggested by the most smart, the most wonderful, the most amazing person in the whole world. It's Ruby, so thank you so much for your suggestion. I appreciate you and all of the support that you give me every single week with this podcast. You are the best. I love and appreciate you so much. Right, are we ready? Buckle up, because Lilith's tale stretches quite literally across millennia, from ancient Mesopotamian myths to modern art, literature, and pop culture. So let's begin with her origins. For 4,000 years, Lilith has wandered the earth, featuring in the mythic imaginations of writers, artists, and poets. So to truly understand Lilith, we first need to travel back in time to ancient Mesopotamia, where her story begins. Lilith is thought to have originated in Sumerian mythology around 4,000 years ago, and actually the same time period as Inanna, who we spoke about on an earlier episode. In early texts, she was known as Lilitu, which is a Sumerian word for female demons or wind spirits. The Lilitu dwell in desert lands and open country spaces, and is especially dangerous to pregnant women and infants. Her breasts are filled with poison, not milk. The Lilitu is also associated with the Ardat lily, which are sexually frustrated and infertile females who behave aggressively towards young men. And the earliest surviving mention of Lilith is in the story Gilgamesh and the Hullapu tree. And if you remember, I actually mentioned Lilith in our episode on Inanna when we talked about this story. And in that story, Lilith is driven out into the desert by the brave Gilgamesh. In ancient Mesopotamian society, Lilith or Lilitu were said to have struck when humans were at their most vulnerable, with pregnancy and infancy being the main times. They were most likely used as a way to explain things such as high infant mortality rate, death in childbirth, and miscarriages. Remember, we're talking about a time before science as we know it, and to have a way of explaining these things, these awful, terrible things, could have brought a massive amount of comfort and made these events feel a little bit less random. And after all, that's what a lot of mythology is. It's a way of explaining the unexplainable. But what did Lilith look like? The visual depictions of her have varied wildly over the centuries. So let's take a little look at some of them throughout the ages. Originating about the same time as the Gilgamesh epic is a terracotta plaque known as the Burney relief, and it was originally identified as the first known pictorial representation of Lilith. The Babylonian relief shows her as a beautiful naked sylph with bird wings and taloned feet, her hair contained under a cap decorated with several pairs of horns. She stands atop 2 lions and between 2 owls, apparently bending them to her will. Lilith's association with owls, a predatory and nocturnal bird, bespeaks a connection to flight and night terrors. However, it is important to note that more recently scholars have identified this as probably a depiction of Inanna rather than Lilith. And as I've said, I've already done an episode on Inanna, so you can find out more about her in that episode. There is, however, another limestone wall tablet dating from the 7th or 8th century BCE discovered in Syria. And this was most likely somewhat of an amulet against Lilith, who was believed to be lying in wait to attack the mother and the child. And on this tablet there is an inscription which translates to, "O you who fly in the darkened rooms, be off with you this instant Lilith, thief, breaker of bones." And I'll include a link to this tablet in the show notes so you can take a little look at it for yourself. But this type of tablet demonstrates the way ancient people navigated these seemingly random events like death and childbirth, infant mortality and miscarriage. These tablets and amulets were a way to ward off Lilith and hopefully to stop these things from happening. And I suppose that was probably quite a comforting thing for them in a way. Over time, as we move into medieval Europe, artists began to depict Lilith as a bit more human-like, though she often retained certain animalistic traits like these snakes wrapped around her or serpentine hair. These symbols link her to temptation and danger, kind of reminiscent of her role in seducing Adam away from God's command, and we're going to talk about that very shortly. If we fast forward to modern art, Lilith has become even more multifaceted. Artists in the 19th and 20th century often painted her as this alluring, seductive woman, simultaneously beautiful and dangerous. Symbolist painters like Dante Gabriel Rossetti famously depicted her as a bit of a femme fatale. And we see kind of a similar thing here as we did with Medusa, all the way back in our very first episode. This depiction of female sexuality being a dangerous and evil thing, something to be feared. However, again, like Medusa, later feminist artists reclaimed her image and began to portray Lilith as a symbol of female independence and power. And much like Medusa, these sexual themes, these alluring looks, they were a thing to be proud of, to wear as a badge of honour. So now you know a little bit about what Lilith looked like, and a little bit about her origins. Let's dive into some mythological tales that she features in. But first, I have a word from another podcast, which I think you guys might really enjoy. It's called 2 Lives, and it features some fascinating stories of transformations. So I'll let them tell you a little bit about that podcast, and you can go and check that out if it sounds good to you.
2 Lives. Stories of people who have faced darkness. We're talking mysterious illnesses, loss, cults, even grizzly bears. Near-death experiences like the Oklahoma City bombing, where Amy Downs stayed buried for 6 hours.
They could not see me. I was buried under 10 feet of rubble, and my right hand was sticking out of the side of the rubble pile. So they found my hand. So I thought, this is over. I'm free. I'm overjoyed. About the time they grab my hand, I hear men yelling in the background, "There's another bomb. There's another bomb. Let's go. Let's go." I heard, and I could also feel what was left of the building shaking with people running. So I just started immediately saying my name over and over and tell my family I love them, because I knew that was it.
And then we learn what's often the worst day of their life how that day could change something inside of them, reveal something they didn't know before about themselves.
And I start just everything in me trying to run up. And I could see the lights of the stadium, and I hear Mike Riley's voice go, Amy Downs has done it. She's coming in. Let's let her hear. Oh, God, I just want to cry. Let her hear you. Make some noise. And I hear this roar come from this stadium at midnight, y'all. Midnight. These people are still there. I'm the last one. And Mike Riley says, Amy Downs, you are an Iron Man. And I'll never forget that.
The title, Two Lives, comes from a quote, "We all have two lives. The second begins the moment we realize we have only one." New episodes every other Tuesday on your favorite podcast platform.
So we already know that Lilith was first mentioned in the story of Gilgamesh, Inanna, and the Halapu tree, and that to Sumerians she was seen as a demonic threat. But it wasn't long before Lilith became ingrained into new cultures in the Near East, with Canaanites, Hebrews, and Israelites. And this is where we see Lilith appear in the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Old Testament. But she only has one mention by name, in Isaiah 34:14. This is somewhat of an apocalyptic poem, warning against encounters with foreigners who worship other deities. The prophet, in this passage, tells that the land of Edom will be ravaged and laid to waste. And the specific part that mentions Lilith goes, "Wildcats shall meet hyenas, goat demons shall greet each other. There too the Lilith shall repose, and find herself a resting place." And this is really interesting, as if you remember in the story with Gilgamesh, Lilith flees to the deserted wastelands, and that's where she still remains in this Hebrew passage. We think about what the wilderness traditionally symbolises. It's this mental and physical barrenness. It's a place where creativity and life itself are easily extinguished. Lilith, the feminine opposite of the masculine order, is banished from the fertile territory and exiled to a barren wasteland. But this is not the only mention of Lilith in Jewish mythology and folklore. In fact, in the 9th century CE, Jewish mythology began to cast Lilith as the first wife of Adam from the book of Genesis. And this account is called the Alphabet of Ben Sirah, which is a highly satirical, almost heretical at times, Hebrew work. It's a compilation of 2 lists of proverbs, 22 of them in Aramaic, 22 of them in Hebrew, both arranged as alphabetic acrostics, followed by a Haggadic commentary. And it's in the 5th alphabet where we find Lilith. Now, you know, we love an extract on Ladies of Law, so I will read a little bit of it for you. Keep in mind, though, that there are varying translations of this passage, and I'm just choosing the one that I liked reading the best. So please do, at your leisure, go and have a look at some others. They do vary a little bit. But it goes a little something like this. "While God created Adam, who was alone, he said, 'It is not good for man to be alone.' He also created a woman from earth, as he had created Adam himself. And he called her Lilith. Adam and Lilith immediately began to fight. She said, 'I will not lie below.' And he said, 'I will not lie beneath you, but only on top, for you are fit only to be in the bottom position, while I am to be the superior one.' Lilith responded, 'We are equal to each other inasmuch as we are both created from the earth.' But they wouldn't listen to one another. When Lilith saw this, she pronounced the ineffable name and flew away into the air. Adam stood in prayer before his Creator. 'Sovereign of the universe,' he said, 'the woman you gave me has run away.' At once, the Holy One, blessed be he, sent these 3 angels to bring her back. Said the Holy One to Adam, "If she agrees to come back, what is made is good. If not, she must permit 100 of her children to die every day." The angels left God and pursued Lilith, whom they overtook in the midst of the sea, in the mighty waters wherein the Egyptians were destined to drown. They told her God's word, but she did not wish to return. The angels said, "We shall drown you in the sea." "Leave me," she said. "I was created only to cause sickness to infants. If the infant is male, I have dominion over him for 8 days after his birth, and if female, for 20 days. When the angels heard Lilith's word, they insisted she go back. But she swore to them by the name of the living and eternal God, "Whenever I see you or your names or your forms in an amulet, I will have no power over that infant." She also agreed to have 100 of her children die every day. Accordingly, every day 100 demons perish, and for the same reason, we write the angels' names on the amulets of young children. When Lilith sees their names, she remembers her oath and the child recovers. So in summation, Lilith was Adam's first wife. Yes, he had 2 wives, how very scandalous. She said, "Look, I like variety, let me be on top sometimes." And Adam said, "Absolutely not a chance. I like what I like, and we're not skewing from that. We're going to stay, me on top, you on the bottom, forever." And Lilith said, "But we're literally made from the same earth. We are equal, so let's treat each other that way." Adam was adamant. I hope you get that joke. If you don't, that was a joke. He was adamant that this was not the case. And so Lilith said, "For God's sake, I'm done with this," and ran away. After her departure from Eden, legend says that she fled to the Red Sea, where she consorted with demons, birthing countless demonic offspring. Around 100 a day, in fact. And these are the babies that I mentioned in the passage I just read. The ones that the angel said that God would take away from her if she didn't go back to Adam. This led to Lilith becoming a scapegoat once again for infant mortality, but this time in Jewish folklore, as it was believed that she would strangle newborn babies in their sleep. However, it is interesting to consider that this connection to the death of infants is kind of similar to the previous iterations of Lilith and the Lilitu, which of course were not associated with Jewish texts. So it's most likely that there's been a little bit of cultural exchange here, with parts of different folklore and mythology bleeding into each other to create this version of Lilith. And as a quick aside, do you remember when I talked about the tablet earlier to ward off Lilith? This tradition is another thing that has bled into Jewish culture, where necklaces and amulets inscribed with her name were placed around the necks of infants for protection. You can still buy these necklaces today. I know this because I have looked. And there's also a Muslim version of the story of Lilith, whereby Lilith and Adam were created as twins joined together at the back. She again demanded equality, which was also denied again by Adam, and she left him in anger. And she went on to sleep with Satan, creating the demonic jinn, which you may very well have heard of. Idris Elba actually plays one in a very weird movie that I once watched on a plane. But that's another version of the stories of Lilith. She really has touched so many different cultures. Lilith also plays a role in Kabbalistic mysticism, where she occupies this complex and enigmatic role, again blending ancient mythology with esoteric Jewish thought. In Kabbalistic mysticism, Lilith's role becomes more intricate, with lots of different layers of symbolic meaning. She's often associated with the Sitra Achra, or the other side, a realm outside divine purity, representing dark forces that oppose the harmony of creation. Lilith is also linked to temptation and impurity, especially sexual and spiritual transgression. In the tome The Zohar, which means splendour, curated in Spain by Moses de Leon between 1250 and 1305, Lilith is painted as a seductress and a demon. She's sometimes identified as the wife of Samael, a powerful demon and an angel of death, again strengthening this association with Lilith and darkness. Together, the pair represent chaos and destructive forces in the universe. And there are also stories of Lilith appearing to men in their dreams through seduction, drawing them into sin. She was believed to have the power to steal the essence of men who succumb to her, making her a symbol of the dangers of unchecked desire and sexuality. Her demon offspring are said to come from these illicit unions. Lilith even attempted to seduce King Solomon. The tale goes that she comes in the guise of the Queen of Sheba. But when the Israelite king spies her hairy legs, he realizes that she's not the Queen of Sheba. She's actually a beastly imposter. She is Lilith. I've lost it at the thought that the hairy legs were the dead giveaway. But you know, it had to be something. But it's kind of made me never want to shave my legs again, if I'm honest. What a story. I couldn't not include that one, so I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. In the Zohar, Lilith is also connected to the Qliphoth, the husks or impure shells that stand in opposition to the Sephirot, which are the 10 emanations of God's light. The Qliphoth are symbolic of the corruption of divine energy, and Lilith is seen as one of the primary forces that animate them and embodies the unholy and perverse expressions of the feminine. In fact, Lilith's role in Kabbalistic mysticism can also be understood as a really complex symbol of feminine power. She represents the untamed, the unyielding aspects of womanhood that reject subservience and patriarchal norms. In a way, Lilith can be viewed as a counterbalance to the more idealized and docile feminine archetypes represented by figures like Eve in the Bible or Shekinah, the divine feminine presence in the Kabbalah. Lilith actually has quite the rivalry with the Shekinah, and the Zohar describes moments where Lilith attempts to interfere in the union between Shekinah and Tiferet, who was a male divine emanation who represented beauty and balance. Lilith seeks to disrupt their harmony, and thus a battle between the two ensues, mirroring a cosmic struggle between order and chaos, good and evil, purity and impurity. But Lilith's legacy doesn't end in ancient texts, oh no. So let's explore how her image has been used and transformed over time. Lilith features prominently in Renaissance literature, where she evolved from her roots in Jewish mysticism and mythology into a symbol that fascinated Christian writers, poets, and artists. The Renaissance was a time of renewed interest in classical antiquity, theology, and esotericism, so it's only natural that Lilith's character was taken to new dimensions in this time period. Renaissance thinkers were really interested in classical mythology and biblical themes, with writers often combining traditions in their works. And so Lilith became somewhat of a recurring figure in literature and art, where her stories were infused with elements from other classical sources such as the Greek goddesses of the night or the temptresses from Greco-Roman mythology like Circe or the Sirens. While Lilith is not explicitly mentioned in John Milton's Paradise Lost of 1667, many scholars and readers alike have drawn a connection between Lilith and some of the key themes and characters in the poem. And no, Milton never refers to Lilith by name, but her influence can be felt as sort of a shadowy precursor to the events of Paradise Lost, influencing the portrayal of Eve, Satan's rebellion, and the role of temptation in the fall of man. Although she's absent as a character, Lilith's presence looms in the background, shaping the poem's exploration of sin, free will, and the fall. We can also find reference to Lilith in Renaissance art, again in a more indirect way, with works by artists such as Michelangelo drawing on these similar themes of temptation and sin and the dual nature of femininity. Michelangelo's portrayal of the serpent in the Garden of Eden in the Sistine Chapel is sometimes said to have been influenced by the myth of Lilith, as the serpent in this painting is depicted with a female face and form. Could this be an underlying connection to the seductress Lilith? I'll put a link in the show notes so you can have a little look, and let me know in the comments if you think that it could be none other than Lilith. A little later on, Lilith appears in Goethe's Faust, where she's a minor character and portrayed as the first wife of Adam. Here too, she appears as an emblem of dangerous female sexuality. She's introduced as Lilith, Adam's first wife. Beware of her lovely hair. That's how she gets young men in her snare. So we see an obvious reference to Lilith's role as Adam's first wife from the Jewish folklore we discussed earlier, and also an emphasis on this lovely seductive hair, which shows her association with temptation and danger. And it also fits nicely in with the broader themes of temptation, desire, and consequences of human weakness that are present throughout Faust. Lilith appears again a little bit later on in Faust. Now, this is a very big word that is very German, and so I do apologise for my definite mispronunciation, but here it goes. She appears in the Walpurgisnacht scene. Here, she appears alongside other figures of folklore and mythology, blurring the lines between reality and myth. Her brief appearance is part of a larger tapestry of demonic figures that populate the world of Faust, which explores the supernatural and the unknown. The Walpurgisnacht scene takes place in a supernatural realm where witches and demons gather in a night of revelry and rebellion. I personally would like an invite, because it sounds quite fun, actually. I'd like to go. But Lilith herself is one of these party guests, with her rebellion against Adam and the established order in her own myth, fitting and reinforcing her place amongst the other emblems of defiance, like the witches who appear alongside her. And Lilith's story has shifted even more dramatically since Faust in the 1800s. In the 20th and 21st centuries, she's been reinterpreted through a more modern lens. In the 1950s, C.S. Lewis invoked her image in the Chronicles of Narnia by creating the White Witch, one of the most sinister characters in this imaginary world. Would you like to hear another extract? Excellent. I am spoiling you with extracts today. That's what I don't understand, Mr. Beaver, said Peter. I mean, isn't the witch human? She'd like us to believe it, said Mr. Beaver. And that's how she is trying to call herself queen. But she's no daughter of Eve. She comes from your father Adam's first wife, Lilith. She was one of the jinn. On the other side, she comes from the giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch. So this is a bit of a mix of origin tales of Lilith with a bit of fantasy thrown in. However, as the daughter of Lilith, the White Witch is determined to kill the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve. She imposes a perpetual freeze on Narnia, so that it is always winter, but never Christmas. In an apocalyptic tale of good overcoming evil, Aslan, creator, king of Narnia, and Liam Neeson, kills the witch and ends her cruel reign. However, for many a modern audience, Lilith is no longer a symbol of evil or of darkness, but one of female empowerment, of independence and rebellion. Her myth has found new relevance in a contemporary society where feminist writers are reclaiming Lilith as an icon of autonomy, of sexual freedom, and revolt against patriarchal control. Judith Plaskow's essay of 1972, The Coming of Lilith, is one of the earliest examples of this. Pascal was a Jewish feminist theologian who wrote this short story imagining Lilith and Eve coming together as allies rather than rivals. Eve, once curious about the woman who left the garden, finds in Lilith a companion in the struggle against patriarchal control. This story shifted Lilith's role from a figure of demonic seduction to one of sisterhood and solidarity, emphasizing the feminist values of unity and shared resistance. In feminist writings, Lilith also becomes an icon of women's sexual liberation. Her departure from Adam has often been interpreted as a rejection of sexual submission, and also for the right to control her own body and desires. In this light, Lilith stands for women's rights to sexual agency and freedom from societal constraints that police women's sexuality. One of the most prominent examples of women reclaiming this narrative is the Lilith Fair, a musical festival founded by Sarah McLachlan in 1997. The festival celebrated female musicians and aimed to give them a platform in an industry traditionally dominated by men. And the festival included musicians such as Fiona Apple, Tracy Chapman, The Cardigans, Sheryl Crow and Erykah Badu. And by invoking Lilith's name, the festival underscored the message of female solidarity, female empowerment and creativity. And I love this so much. I'd have 100% attended this if I hadn't have been 3 years old when it happened. But honestly, brilliant. And there are videos of this up on YouTube. It's fantastic. So I'd definitely give it a go, because I've just given you a very small list of names when there are quite literally hundreds of amazing female artists that came together for this. Lilith is also still revered as a goddess or archetype, representing the dark feminine in certain strands of feminist spirituality and neo-paganism. So, slightly like the Morrigan, Lilith is actually still actively worshipped in some Wiccan traditions, where she's honoured as a goddess embodying female sexuality, female freedom, and the refusal to be tamed. This spiritual reclaiming often celebrates her wildness and connection to primal feminine power. So Lilith truly is an icon of rebellion in modern feminism, and actually one of the most enduring legacies of her influence is the Lilith magazine, a Jewish feminist publication founded in 1976. The magazine is named after Lilith and explores issues such as gender inequality, religious reform and social justice from a feminist perspective. And Lilith magazine has played a crucial role in fostering feminist discourse within Jewish communities and beyond, embodying the spirit of rebellion that Lilith represents. In pop culture, Lilith is a little bit like Medusa, and she appears quite literally everywhere. If you are, or ever were, a supernatural girly, or maybe you were a super Hulock Tumblr user, those were the days, the sweet days of my youth. Did any of you ever use Tumblr? I actually had a Daniel Radcliffe tribute Tumblr at one point in my life. And I can't believe I've just admitted that. But anyway, I digress. You might remember that Lilith is actually one of the central antagonists in the Supernatural series. And she's portrayed there as a powerful demon, and actually the first to have been turned by Lucifer. She often inhabits the body of innocent children to wreak havoc, and her character focuses on cunning and cruelty, echoing more traditional descriptions of Lilith. Lilith also appears in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina over on Netflix. I haven't watched this one, but I have heard good things. And I'm told in this series she's quite a complex character, both a villain and an ally. She's the first woman made from the same clay as Adam and goes on to be the consort of Lucifer, ultimately ascending to be Queen of Hell. She wants to be free of Lucifer's domination and fights for her own autonomy, so she represents both the traditional Lilith, but also the more modern feminist themes that have become associated with Lilith recently. Lilith also shows up in another super popular show, True Blood. This one I actually did watch some of and once did a very cringy acoustic cover of the theme song. You're learning all about me today. I'm so sorry. It's TMI. But in this series, she's presented as the mother of all vampires and a godlike figure worshipped by vampire kind. And she's a primal force in this show, representing vampires' dark nature and belief in their superiority over humans. Aside from TV and literature, and again, much like Medusa, Lilith appears in video games, most notably Diablo 4, where she's one of the main antagonists. In the game, she's depicted as the daughter of Mephisto, Lord of Hatred, and the creator of Sanctuary, the world in which the game takes place. Lilith is often referred to as the mother of Sanctuary in the game, and she's a very complex character who both seeks to protect humanity and also to manipulate it for her own ends. I've played this game. I really enjoyed it. Add that to your TBP list, your to be played list. It is very, very good, and Lilith is such a massive integral part of that game. So even in modern culture, Lilith remains a compelling figure, embodying the allure and danger that she's always represented. And whether a seductress, a demon, or a symbol of freedom, Lilith's influence is undeniable. So, who is Lilith? A demon? A seductress? Or a feminist icon? The truth is, she's all of these and more. Lilith's story has been shaped and reshaped by cultures that have told it, and each version offers new insights into how we view power, autonomy, rebellion, and feminine sexuality. Personally, I actually really love Lilith, and this might have been probably my favourite episode so far, and yes, I might have said that before, but I mean it every time. They outdo themselves every week. I truly love every bit of research that I do for this podcast, and I'm so grateful to you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave a little review, and if you really loved it, share it with a friend. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Ladies of Lore. I'll be back next week to unravel another thread in the rich tapestry of women in folklore and mythology. Until then, I'll see you later.